For those that don't know, Randonautica, it's a game to make you explore places you would have never thought to visit. The fun thing about it is that a lot of people have reported that there is a glitch in the Matrix in these randomly generated locations. I have listened to a few people experience, and they all talk about weird symbols, doors in the middle of nowhere, cars that disappear, all that fun stuff. For me, I didn't see this as a glitch or anything. People are expecting to see weird stuff, so they'll pick up on anything, but a friend of mine, Millie, was super into it. Dude, trust me, she was speaking with her mouth full, excitedly scrolling through her phone. You have to have intention behind it to have the full experience, as if I was really only half paying attention. I'd only know Millie for a month or two, but she was really the only person I'd been able to make friends with. Starting in another city left me pretty isolated. But Millie, ever the extrovert, attached herself at my hip when we shared dorms. She was loud, secretive, and fairly strange at times, but I was thankful for some company. You just end up convincing yourself you've experienced something when you're looking for it. That's no glitch. She gave me a huff and took another bite out of her dinner. I kept my focus on the TV, some bleak news story that I was barely listening to, just watching a few pictures scroll past. I was bored, really bored. When Millie stood up, I started scraping leftovers into the bin. I decided that the idea of exploring a city beyond city streets might be a good way to get comfortable, glitch or not. Just before she left the room, I spoke up. "Right, I'll have to go, huh?" She had a massive smile on her face, so I knew she got it. I smiled too. "I'll do the rando thing, but..." Millie was already pushing the app screen in my face. I pushed it away and she spoke up over her, ranting, "But I'm doing it by myself. You give me one, I'll give you one, and we don't tell each other what our intentions is until after." There was a part of me who actually wanted to see if this was real. So surely, if we didn't know that we were looking for, but just so happened stumbled on it, maybe that was some proof. Millie's face just split into a wider smile. Looking back, I wish I'd noticed just how much she loved this idea. "Oh, brilliant. We'll do it on Sunday, yeah?" It was Friday evening. I was going to suggest we do it on Saturday and get it out of the way. "It'll give us some time to think of our proper intention," Millie said, wiggling her fingers like a witch casting a spell, and laughed. "Yeah, sure." The next day, Millie spent the entire day in her room. I did the weekly shop and cleaned up around the flat. Spent the afternoon on the couch. Every now and then, when I walked past her room, I heard something like a furiously whispering argument, growing in volume and then cut short. It lasted the full day. I honestly felt a bit bad. It sounded like a rough argument, so I made her some extra dinner and put it in the microwave, texting her about it so she could come and get it. "We'll leave at 6 p.m. tomorrow. I eagerly await your location." At this point, I'd honestly forgotten about the plan. I downloaded the app as I was eating, thought of a simple intention, just my name written somewhere, screenshotted the location and sent it to her with the game on. The location she'd give was just the map. She probably just cropped it, and when I searched it, it was somewhere in a massive park about 30 minutes away. 6 in the afternoon. It seemed a bit late. It was winter, so it was basically pitch black at the time, but I thought it would add a bit of fun to the whole experience. I finished my evening off, threw a torch and a Swiss Army knife in my bag just to be safe, and went to bed honestly excited for a little adventure the next day. I slept in on the Sunday. It was already 1 p.m. by the time I rolled out of bed, but I dressed early and made my way to the kitchen. Spending the day with some mates message you when I'm at the location. I thought it was a bit shitty that she'd gone out after she got so excited for the plan. A bit weird, but shrugged it off and waited a couple hours till catching the bus to the park. It was such a normal day, a normal week even. Nothing had stood out, so I was glad to do something out of the routine. On a dot at 6, I got a selfie from Millie in some dark alleyway by a bunch of graffiti. I smiled, hopped off the bus, and started to look around for my exact location. The torch came in handy. The search led me off the path and away from the street lamps, past your typical late-night park visitors, eventually to an old fenced-off building. I was flooded with adrenaline and fear, honestly. I didn't think it was a good idea to search the grounds or hop the fence. I took a picture and sent it to Millie. Don't think I'll go in, but it looks pretty cool. No. The reply was immediate. Emma, that's unfair. You'll ruin the fun. Go in. The police don't even go around there no more. They will not notice. It'll be so worth it. I rocked on my heels, a heavy worry in my chest. It would be a lot of excitement wasted if I didn't explore even a little bit. Maybe I should go past the fence, and that would be enough. The adrenaline felt nice. It distracted me from the cold biting of my nose and the feeling of my eyes on the back of my neck. I was getting all worked up because this was exactly the setting to get someone worked up. I walked around the perimeter of the fence till I found a space big enough to crawl through. I shimmied through and took a deep breath. It was silent this far into the park. The cars on the busy street were so far away, their distant hum blended into the soft scuttle of leaves and wildlife. Despite my hammering chest, I felt calm. I didn't feel alone. I explored the ground outside the house, taking pictures of the imposing structure at every other angle, exhausting every square foot till I sat down on the ground, onto the dirty steps, and took a sip of water. I'd been here for less than an hour. To go home now felt wasteful. I could have waited for another day when it was lighter, when I felt a bit safer. I really should have waited, but I was having fun, so I jogged up the steps and jiggled the handle of the door. It resisted a few forceful shoves till with the whole weight of my body it swung open. I laughed at myself, dusting the dirt off my shoulder, and looked around. It was dusty. For an ancient, run-down house, it was fairly clean. The entrance had black and white tiles, 2 doors either side of me and one behind the stairs, the majority of which had collapsed. I first went to the door on my right. There was no resistance in opening this one. It swung open with a quick creak and led to a cozy little living room. It looked like it had been abandoned in a hurry. There were no covers over the old furniture. The few shelves were packed full of sun-stained books. There sat a table near the earth with an open book, a half-done candle, and a plate with a few very old crumbs. I wondered why all this stuff remained. This had to be genuine antique, so for it to still be standing here, near untouched, was strange. Perhaps this was my first true Randonautica experience. I spent a while just exploring the little room, taking as many photos as I could. There was a copy of the Pride and Prejudice on one of the shelves, and when I took it out, it was fairly in good nick. Flipping through the pages were fragile and brown and not crumbling in dust. In the right-hand corner, inside of the cover, faded cursive of Elizabeth O'Reilly, 1827. Most of the books were still holding together really well. I slipped a few of them in my bag. It was incredible. I could have spent the entire night just exploring in the room, frozen in time. At that moment, I was so thankful I had done this, but the cold was starting to get to me. So I slipped on my backpack and left the room with every intention to leave, but the door opposite loomed, snagged every bit of my curiosity. I stared at it for a few moments till I giddily jogged over and swung open the door. It was just as cozy as the other room, with a wide bookcase I was immediately drawn to. I ran my finger over the spines on the top, and familiar title caught my eye: Pride and Prejudice. My first thought, honestly, now there was one to keep and one to sell, so I opened it to check its condition. It was just as good as the rest. The pages fragile and brown but holding together, and in the right-hand corner inside the cover sat the faded cursive of Elizabeth O'Reilly, 1827. I paused and reread the cursive over again. I took off my backpack and took out the copy of the Pride and Prejudice and held them side by side, identical, beyond identical. When I opened the covers, the writing was basically the same except the spelling, except the E. I put the two books back in my bag and stepped by the entrance of the room. There were no covers over the old furniture like it had been abandoned in a hurry. In a few shelves there were packed of full sun-stained books. There sat a table near the earth with an open book, a half-done candle, and a plate with a few very old crumbs. I ran to the room on the right side, then back to the left. I took a picture of the right room, then I took a picture of the left room. Standing on the black and white tiles, flipping between the two like it was the world's hardest game of spot the difference. Suddenly the cold wasn't an issue. My heart was racing. Could this be a genuine example of a glitch in the Matrix, a break in reality? I sent the pictures to Millie, rambling on that she was right. This was beyond anything I could have expected. She replied quickly, "Have you checked the back room?" "Millie, are you not seeing this? This is amazing. What the F?" Paused halfway through my next text. Suddenly the identical rooms didn't feel too important anymore. I stood on the black and white tiles with my heart in my throat. Why did she know there was a back room? I looked right to the shadow door beneath the stairs and tried to listen over my thumping heart. The feeling of eyes on the back of my neck came back like a viper strike, its venom seeping through my body, turning my muscles to stone. I stared and listened. I couldn't bring myself to move, to breathe. Over the silence of the old house, I heard whispers behind the shadowed door. Mindlessly, I walked to the right room. I don't know why I didn't just sprint right outside the front door. At that time, I didn't even register it as an option. The mind loses all sensibility when under stress. I backed right into the corner and slowly reached around and pulled out the army knife, flipping out the tiny blade and flinching at the tiny click. Millie was spamming me with messages. I felt like they could hear the vibration through the walls, and I couldn't stop myself from crying. The tears spilling over my cheeks kept me grounded as the cold wind made them feel like ice on my skin. I steeled myself, but the resolve melted away when the voices grew to an angry hisses and the shadow door swung open. It sounded like two men. Their footsteps rang around the house, breaking the silence like a brick against the glass. They were shouting at each other. I could barely remember what they were saying now, but I remember clutching the knife in one hand and stifling my erotic breathing. What I do remember, what rings through my head whenever I haven't looked over my shoulder in a while, was simply, "You check that room, I've got this one." I could have dropped dead out of sheer fright. I wanted to scream, to start pleading for my life before he was even done with the sentence, but I was so frozen. He would be able to see the moment he walked in the room, a crouched, terrified woman with a tiny knife held out in front of her, clutched in her hand like it was a lifeline. My head was empty. I stood up slowly and took one step, just in time for the door to open. He saw me, went to shout to his partner, but I jabbed the blade in his eyes. I kept stabbing, frenzied, zeroed in on taking out this threat. His partner grabbed me by the hair and dragged me off. The other just dropped with the knife still in his eye. The man wrenched his hand tighter in my hair and punched as hard as he could. He kept punching and spitting insults. I had to get away. I went mad in his grip. Didn't hold anything back. I screamed, I kicked, punched, scratched. When he twisted me towards him, I latched my teeth into the side of his face, kept biting, grinding my teeth like he was a tough steak, and ripped away, half of his ear coming with me. That was my chance. I heaved the old door open and sprinted, screaming at the top of my lungs. My memories are a bit hazy from that point. I vaguely remember running into a group of teens and scaring them half to death with my wailing and general bloodiness, but they called the police, walked me towards the entrance of the park as I just heaved and heaved. The police interviews are blurred too. The paramedics gave me a shock blanket and gave me at least 4 different officers the same story in the hospital, struggling to talk past my shattered jaw. Had my phone confiscated as evidence when I mentioned that app. Took them 3 weeks till I got the thing back. They found my knife and the dude attached to it, left in the right room, still alive. I watched him get wheeled into the ambulance, cuffs around his wrist. That knife took even longer to get given back to me. During the time, I got off any charges for trespassing, which was probably my highest point for the next following months. Simply put, I narrowly escaped a rare but effective method of human trafficking. In fact, I was the first woman in a string of similar disappearances to come back alive. This had nothing to do with Randonautica. It was just a really convenient scapegoat. Millie was a recruitment worker, if you will. She tried to disappear, but they found her at some border with the other dude, now with one less ear. After the trials faded, TV once I moved back into my parents' home, I often found myself flicking through the pictures from the night. The house is a crime scene. Its security has been upgraded, so I don't think I could ever get back in even if I wanted to. I entertained the idea of going to the government auction and seeing if any of the furniture cropped up, but I could barely leave the house. I'm left to flick through those pictures. I still have the books, Elizabeth O'Reilly and Elizabeth O'Reilly's. I spent hours just sizing up the text. That extra E is sometimes the only thing I can think of. Maybe it's the missing E instead. It's been a year since this died down, since I felt like I could go back on track. Curiosity, my old friend, came flooding over me just yesterday, and I went through my old messages. They hadn't deleted Millie's messages. I scrolled through the ones she had sent me, the muscle memory of me trembling outstretched hand making me swallow a gag. Because them, however, just before my own surge of messages was a picture. I kept reading it over and over again. I can't stop smiling like an effing maniac, but I guess it's what I asked for. I zoomed in the image of a collection of graffiti, some grand, some simple, behind a few layers of paint, partially covered but clear through the red, plain but bold in strokes of a faded black marker that said, Emma,